guys, welcome to the Shannanigans with Shreya podcast. It is the first episode of the new year's, so happy 2026 everyone. Over the last few years, every January I've heard of two main trends happening. The first one is Veganuary and the other one is Dry January. So in this episode, I wanted to dive into the science, but first of all, we're going to go on to our neuroscience fact of the day. So this one is from a study out of Singapore. In this study, researchers found that high screen exposure before the age of 2, which is usually a very critical infancy window, a lot of brain development happening around the time. So high screen exposure essentially accelerates the way that the brain matures in the visual and cognitive control networks. Now, you might think that their brain is maturing quicker, they're going to be more developed than the kids their age. But in a way, it's kind of a trade-off because it's like a house that's being built too fast. These networks are going to specialize way too early. They're not going to have that flexibility and the way to connect based on complex functions later on in life, because this study basically found that exposure to screens that's causing accelerated brain development leads to slower decision making at the age of 8 and then significantly higher anxiety symptoms by the age of 13. So the takeaway from this study is that the first 2 years in an infant's life are very sensitive. It's very important that there's more parent-child engagement, like reading together or playing together rather than putting them in front of a screen. So yeah, these findings essentially just provide evidence to make more policies on early childhood. Now, coming on to the topic of today's episode, you'd actually be surprised how many people take part in Dry January, which is about saying no to alcohol, and Veganuary would be about trying a vegan diet. At the start of the year, I hear quite a bit about these lifestyle choices or trends. I don't know what to call them, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that this is not to judge anyone for choosing not to, be vegan or not to stop drinking or whatever it is. I was just genuinely curious to know what's the science behind these trends, how they benefit the body, and how they're interesting lifestyle choices to make. You'd see loads of grocery stores stocking up on a lot of vegan-based food. So according to YouGov data for 2026, about 3% of British people are officially taking the Veganuary pledge this year, and then 10% are going to try Dry January. And even if they're not sticking to the whole thing, there are a third of UK adults saying that they're planning to buy more plant-based products this month. Veganuary is now a global movement that has 25 million people participating worldwide. And let's talk about Dry January. The recent Harvard Gazette piece suggested that we should view Dry January like an experiment. So it's interesting to see that if you stop drinking for 31 days, the way that your body resets, your biology responds quite fast. So there is research saying that just 1 month of sobriety can lower your biological age by essentially reducing your oxidative stress and your inflammation, and then reduce your liver fat by up to 20%, and also improve the way that you sleep. So when you're sober for a month, you're likely to find that you're actually getting your deep restorative REM sleep that alcohol usually does not support. Now, there are experts that are saying that if you're going to go back to heavy drinking from February 1st, all of these benefits are going to evaporate. Coming to Veganuary, Oxford University research suggests that moving towards a more plant-based diet is the single biggest thing that you can do to protect the planet sustainably, to potentially reducing the way that your food-related emissions go by up to 73%. So there's a follow-up survey from Veganuary that's found that 6 in 10 participants reported a better mood after they switched to a vegan diet. 55% reported an increase in energy levels, and 48% saw improvements in their skin. There is also an idea that vegan food can be more expensive, but Harvard Health actually found that if you're following a good, not heavily processed plant-based diet, that can actually cut your food costs by about 19% compared to a standard meat-heavy diet. I wanted to pause for a little moment because I wanted to acknowledge that there's a lot of noise digitally and in real life in January, because social media feeds tend to be full of people quote unquote optimizing their lives, living the healthiest versions of themselves, blah blah blah. So it can start to feel like you aren't doing everything you can for your quote unquote ideal lifestyle, and if you're not doing that, you're failing. Choosing to do Veganuary or Dry January does not make you a better person. These are lifestyle choices based on how individuals want to live their life and want to experiment and see how their lives can be impacted by these kind of changes. As I mentioned before, it's been considered more of an experiment. If you're changing things about your lifestyle, it should be more about how it's serving you rather than what you're being told to do. So, if you have a glass of wine, you're not going to die. Because I think it's important to also acknowledge that the goal here isn't actually about not eating meat, not drinking at all. It's more about awareness, about like making informed decisions when you're choosing to, not drink as much or not eat as much meat. It's more about the awareness and making that informed choice of how you're impacting your body, how you're impacting the environment, and to each their own. Your way of implementing different lifestyle changes does not have to look the exact same as someone else's. At the end of the day, it is your life and you're having fun. I think it is nice to acknowledge, specifically in Dry January, if that's something that you're interested in. Are you being too dependent on alcohol? Is that something that you can cut down on? You might see a change in the quality of your life if you do so. And again, that's your own reason for doing that. There are also individuals who become more aware of their own carbon footprint, and then cutting down on meat might help support the goal to be more sustainable overall. Now, a good way also, if you're implementing any of these lifestyle changes, would be not to be a junk food vegan person, because your brain wants more whole foods, not heavily processed. So the idea is that you're trying to focus more on, beans, lentils, nuts, more whole foods that you can get in the grocery store. There is a social survival hack that can be used when you're out drinking with friends or whatever. Instead of saying, I'm not drinking, which can feel quite restrictive, you try to say that, oh, I'm doing a health reset this month. Like, it sounds more active than passive. And if you are deciding to stay plant-based after January, if you are thinking of turning vegan, it is important to remember that you have to supplement your vitamin B12, because a vegan diet does not naturally implement that. So yeah, whether you're just curious, trying to make tweaks into your own lifestyle, congratulations on showing up for yourself. Your brain does respond quite well to like positive reinforcement than to guilt. So it's important to celebrate those wins and ignore the constant monitoring of your own lifestyle. So yeah, all the resources that we mentioned today are linked below in the description. Thank you so much for listening, guys. I'll see you in the next one. And do remember that you define the challenge. The challenge does not define you. Bye.